brief. One is the CRB. I know you're familiar with it. For the people who've been asking for CRB, for a Citizen Review Board for a long time. We were here multiple times last year. And we've also been in your council or on Zoom even as recently as a couple of months ago asking for the same. We also want you to know that tonight we're coming to you with the message that we needed to be permanent and we needed to be lasting. And we're going to give you a plan of how to do that. We're going to present the details of something called a Civilian Police Oversight Authority, a CPOA, if you want to put it in an acronym form. And that is a permanent oversight body to be established here at the municipal level. Our demand number 2 is doing the same thing at the county level for the sheriff's office. So CPOAs at the Fayetteville Police Department level and also at the Cumberland County Sheriff's Office are top 2 demands. Our third demand has to do with the COVID-19 crisis down in the detention center. We know that there have been 33 cases of COVID in the detention center. We understand that that is not directly in your purview to affect. However, all of us should recognize that there was a human rights issue or human rights violations and not providing that population with masks for months, with never releasing a public policy regarding COVID-19 and the detention center, and also with not aggressively testing. We asked the council to reconsider providing a non-binding resolution in support of masks and testing in the detention center to address COVID-19 outbreak. Our fourth demand goes along with number 1 for this council. We expect the CPOA to be established first and then to be followed subsequently by establishment of a Citizen Review Board, CRB. And I'll talk more about that later. And then our last demand, also not something directly in your purview, but something you can affect with the power that you have as elected officials. It is to weigh in on ending cash bail here with the non-binding resolution. Next slide, please. A couple of acronyms that you can hear over and over again throughout this brief. One is the CRB. I know you're familiar with it. For the people at home that are monitoring this is an old issue here in Fayetteville. 2012, there was a study done based on statistics that noted that Black and brown drivers were being targeted while driving by police here in Fayetteville. That study caused a lot of movement at City Hall and in the police department. We had multiple assets come nationally to take a look at practices in our police department. We also had a recommendation at the time by Noble, the National Organization for Black Law Enforcement Executives. And that recommendation was to establish a CRB, or an oversight body here in Fayetteville. So mind you, this is back in 2012, 2013 when this happened. 8 years later, we're still asking for a CRB, a Citizen Review Board. And that fell apart in 2014. And I'll talk a little bit later about why it fell apart and some of the pitfalls to avoid this time around. But know that a CRB is something that us as Fayetteville PACT and multiple organizations in Fayetteville have asked for and demand at this point. And then the other term that you may not be as familiar with is a Civilian Police Oversight Authority, a CPOA. And that oversight authority would be a permanent body that would be established that would really be able to steward and guide the CRB. And I'll talk about what the structure looks like. But know that CPOA is civilians that are permanently hired that sit independently of the police department and actually independently of the city hall and are able to advocate on behalf of citizens as oversight practitioners. A good way to think about this, especially for our veterans that are watching this. In the Army, we have a Secretary of the Army who is a civilian. He wears a suit and tie to work. He doesn't wear a uniform. And that civilian is trusted just as much as uniform members to work on behalf of the United States and the people of the United States. That type of separation from the actual apparatus of the police department and that type of independence is what we need. We need a civilian that's not sworn to protect the thin blue line that will advocate for the people of Fayetteville. And that is embodied in a Civilian Police Oversight Authority, a CPOA. So we want to drill into what oversight means and what it could be for our community. We'll do so in the next slide. You all have probably seen, if you looked at the materials that we provided to you, some documents from NACOL. NACOL is the National Association for Civilian Oversight in Law Enforcement. Kathy and I are NACOL trained. We consider ourselves part of the family. We started noticing last year that there were tons of different models of oversight, and we really needed to try to find something that we could recommend to you as a body that fit Fayetteville and also was forward-leaning enough to have some permanence and not get caught up in a lot of the pitfalls of other CRBs in North Carolina. So some of the ways that an oversight authority can help you really is building a bridge between our city government and the community that we're supposed to take care of, the community that we're supposed to serve and protect. It does this by having people independent of the police department who advocate for civilians and who can build a bridge between our city government and the populace. It also manages risk in a certain way. By looking upstream and establishing systems upstream, you can avoid some of the pitfalls that come through negative interaction, especially the fallout from police misconduct. One of the manifestations of fallout is lawsuits. Our city now has a couple of pending lawsuits from citizens that say we weren't given a proper ear from anybody in City Hall or from anybody at the police department. We don't trust what happened in our process, and as a result, we were treated unjustly. And by investing upstream, by putting an oversight body in place, you can have extra assurance from the community that we're doing our due diligence and bringing opportunities for them to be heard and for their grievances to be addressed properly. All right, next slide, please. So this is what our model looks like. And I'll read this question to you and ask you to consider this. Are we building this for short-term appeasement, or are we building this for long-term effectiveness? I ask you that because, as you know, there are over 200 models of oversight throughout the country. Thinking about the fact that we're somewhere around 108 as far as population in the country, it's overdue for us to have some type of oversight here. We could do things the easy way, the quick way. I think what that would look like is establishing a CRB, say within the next 6 to 8 months, bringing together a diverse group of citizens and saying, have at it. Basically look at these cases from internal affairs and determine which ones you think were out of line or which ones you think were not followed up on properly. Instead of doing that, instead of the quick and easy fix of establishing a citizen review board up front, we're asking you instead to establish a CPOA first, and here's why. CPOA is actually built of oversight practitioners. So they'd have tons more training than Kathy and I. The director of a CPOA, the director of a civilian police oversight authority is usually somebody with a JD, usually somebody who's a lawyer by trade, somebody who understands the continuum of justice and how it impacts citizens at as many intersections. And that director should have at their disposal at least 2 investigators. NACO goes the extra step of saying we will credential and train your oversight practitioners. So we could send this director and 2 investigators to NACO training, have them credentialed in less than a year, and have them come back and actually steward the development of a CRB. So this is going to take a little longer than just standing up a CRB, but we do understand that this is the most thorough way to have permanence in our process. Also, along with recommending the hire of an executive director and 2 investigators, we know that there needs to be an admin or a data person that's somewhere on this team, because the best models of oversight have somebody that's looking at data, making evidence-based recommendations to the police department and to the city council that can be acted on. The best manifestations of oversight actually look at everything from training to use of force policies to use of things like tear gas and present options to the city government on what their policies should look like in order to best impact the community. So we're asking for and really requesting you to give some serious considerations to doing the right thing, really taking a step back, establishing the CPOA on a timeline that we'll present later in the brief, and then allowing that director to have some outreach with the community, a series of forums in different districts to understand what the community needs that review board to look like and what our review board in Fayetteville would best be like, best be built to serve the community. Next slide. So the best model that we've seen here in North Carolina, the closest to what we're suggesting is actually in Greensboro. Kathy and I talked to Letitia McNeil, who was hired as their practitioner on board. She's being trained, and she is a JD, understands exactly what that continuum looks like and what is best for the community. She is also that go-between from the city council to the community. And beyond that, there's nothing in North Carolina that looks like what we're presenting. We do know that there are at least 5 other boards in North Carolina. We do know that it's been established as early in 1997 in places like Charlotte. And we do know that the accusation for a lot of those boards in North Carolina is that they were set up for failure. They were set up in a way that put too much on part-time citizens to come in as a CRB and do the work really that practitioners should be doing and that practitioners do in major cities. We do not want to set our CRB up for failure. We want you to put some serious thought into what our CPOA could look like in order to best serve the city. And here are just a couple of other benefits of oversight practitioners versus just hiring a CRB. There are legal practitioners with training. This will provide you independence and permanence. Mind you, most CRBs, the members are in and out in a cycle of 2 to 3 years. And with a CRB, you'd have somebody that provides continuity so that you're not dealing with troubles like getting a quorum together for a meeting or losing members out of cycle. This is also, as I mentioned earlier, something that could give us a comprehensive look at the practices of the FPD. We've heard as an organization dozens of recommendations from people who have interfaced with us on what the FPD can do better, what the policies how the policies can change to be better. And rather than give you a list of dozens of suggestions, we'd rather tell you and work with you to build a body that focuses really on policies that impact the community in positive ways. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, these oversight practitioners can steward or be stewards of a CRB, of a review board, and continue to provide continuity. Next slide, please. So in summary, our citizens they're demanding substantive change. They're demanding more than just things that look like a performative dance. They need policy that matches the spirit and the demands of this movement. We also, in moving forward, want to invite police input. We want to caution the council, especially on what we see as undue and really immoral interference of the police unions in the past, in 2013-14 in particular. We want you to please listen to the citizens first, listen to community advocates, and then also be aware of any interference from the PBA or any other organization that wants to police themselves. Because we know that if we don't have independent oversight, we are asking the police, in essence, to police themselves, and that's not right. Also know that as an organization, PACT stands ready to guide you, to assist you in standing up these bodies. Understand that we're tied into assets nationally. Statewide, we're linked with NC-SPAN. That's the North Carolina Statewide Police Accountability Network. And then locally, we also have a growing coalition of organizations that want to work with you to make this happen and assist in the process. Next slide, please. And I'll leave you with this. We all have heard a lot about the recent passing of John Lewis and C.T. Vivian just this past weekend. You've heard a lot about what his legacy should mean to us. And luckily for us, John Lewis didn't stop fighting in the 1960s or 70s. He fought throughout his life. In preparation for that, I looked at a lot of the comments that he made even in the last 2 years. And really, he challenged us all, and that's you included as elected officials, to continue the struggle. He talked about it in terms of not just being a struggle that lasted during this 1960s, not something that lasted for years, or not even for a lifetime. He talked about it as a struggle of generations. And if we are to correct a system really that doesn't take care of its citizens as it should, if we're to correct things at a systemic level, then we really have to take his legacy into account, take his words that encourage us to continue to fight, continue to improve our foxhole, and continue to improve our system to heart and continue to fight. So I'll leave you with the words of John Lewis: if not us, then who? If not now, then when? And having said that, I'm going to conclude my portion of the brief. I'll be followed by our president and founder, Ms. Kathy Griggs. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kathy Griggs, and I appreciate the mayor as well as the council allowing us to come and brief you this evening.